I start telling people about hell, I might just scare them off. Where are you going to scare them off to? Hell number 2? Or are you just going to sit there and let them burn?
Got Films is a full-service production company that provides motion picture quality content and production services for use in the film and TV industry. Looking for a seasoned crew, high-quality equipment, or other production services for your film, TV, commercial, corporate convention, sports, news, or interview project? Your search stops here. Some of our projects include NASCAR, American Restoration, Pawn Stars, Counting Cars, Top Chef, BattleBots, Forge and Fire, and Street Outlaws. We have also produced over 60 feature films and documentaries. We're ready for all your needs. Whatever your project, whatever your budget, big or small, Got Films got you. GotFilms.com.
Hey, this is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. Welcome to the program. This is amazing Machinations. Don't forget to check out don'tletthemburn.com. Don't forget you could go to the link tree and see all our links, where to find us, and support us on Teespring. If you want a t-shirt, you can go to my store tab. Plenty of t-shirts there. If you want something hardcore, meaning, you know, more edgy, or something a little bit lighter, we have stuff that promote the gospel and everything out there that relates to God and this program. Check them out if you're interested. And if you find value to this program, hit the like button, please. That helps us out a lot. If you share the video with people that want to learn, that helps us out a lot. We get shadow banned. Okay. We've been doing this for 10 years, and yet we only have 10,000 subscribers. So that tells you we don't have the reach that we should have, and we haven't had it for years. So the good old days of YouTube are gone, and now we're dealing with a bunch of censorship. So, and with that, you could also find us on Rumble. Check us out on Rumble. Check us out on BitChute and other platforms, okay? If you want to reach me and conversate, as long as it's cool and nice, you know, you can reach me on Telegram. Our Telegram channel is growing, and I share a lot of news and, you know, other resources there for you. And so check us out there. And I'm also active on Twitter for now. We'll see where it goes because they're starting to censor again. But today we have Mark Sutherland. Mark, how you doing?
I'm very well, my friend. Lovely to see you and lovely to join you on your program and all your platforms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Good to always good to have you. And today we're going to be covering sort of a multitude of issues that are not talked about regularly in churches, even on a Wednesday night. You know, now my pastor, Pastor Billy Crony, talks about all this stuff. Okay, but other pastors, they're either lacking understanding in Bible prophecy, or they think with the all-millennial view, it's like there's no millennial, we're millennium. We're just waiting for Jesus to return. Then you have the one that says, you know, we're living through the millennium right now. That's allegorical interpretation. So we're futurists, where we say, you know, we're waiting for the rapture. We're waiting for the 7-year tribulation. Not that we're going to be in it, but it's coming. It's a future thing, right? And the millennium is a future subject as well. So when we get all of those subjects lined up, we understand why the world is in such flux right now. Okay, there is something called the NWO. Some people call it New World Order. It goes by many names, and it's butt rest or anchored through theosophy. Theosophy was a thing that came up in the 1800s, and from there you get all sorts of other people. So we're not going to go through all that history today. We're just going to kind of give you a little palate cleanser to get you going in this direction, because it's very important for you to understand some of these subject matters. Even the stuff that just happened with Burning Man, very important. It symbology to the global efforts. Okay, so with that, where do you want to start?
Well, it's interesting. Let's just quickly make a comment on Burning Man, because there are 2 books I will go straight into. I look forward to the fact that we will get our dear friend Carl Tygrib on, and we will have a discussion about Burning Man. And what was also a thrill for me is that I joined up with Carl when I was at the Parliament of World Religions a few weeks ago in Chicago, and we're going to go down the rabbit hole of the Parliament of World Religions. But Carl, who has been, I think, one of our principal researchers over the last 35 years, we need to give him a big shout out, and we will get him on. So I just want to immediately say, here is his book. Here is his book. Okay, Game of Gods. It's that thick. I don't have shares in this book, but I advise people to get it. It is a manual. It's a manual. Okay,
Yes.
with thousands of footnotes. So I just advise people to get that.
But also,
because,
not to cut you off, but also Carl has been on this program many times on this segment. Okay,
right.
so we've done at least 4 or 5 shows with Carl, and he was also on Paranormal Shift talking about some occult stuff. So anyway, go ahead.
No, it's important. It's really important. Particularly his work that he has been doing for many, many, many years, looking at the cultural changes and the influences and what's going on. And he has said to me about Burning Man, and 2 other dear friends were there, my friends Audrey and Brian van der Clay, that what he then talks about is that Burning Man is the elite's playground, and things go on there. So we'll have that discussion, you and I, with him. Now, what's really interesting, you brought up theosophy, right?
Mhm.
So here's a book. I'll just quickly read you the title. The Theosophical Congress held by the Theosophical Society at the Parliament of Religions World's Fair of 1893 at Chicago, Illinois, September the 15th, 16th, and 17th. The Theosophical Society report of proceedings and documents. That is what this book is. That's what that book is about. The reason why you and I are showing books is because the evidence, it's important that we have the evidence. It's important that people build up a library. Sorry, another book. This is really important, and this is a real shout out. A few months ago, I had the wonderful, wonderful privilege of getting William Jasper, who writes, senior editor at large of the New American, who was a reporter at the UN for 33 years. In 1992, he wrote Global Tyranny Step by Step. This book is out of print, but this is another manual. This is an absolute manual. I'm encouraging him to reprint this book. Now, the key thing is that we have to remember, and you mentioned this about the NWO. We got to, and I've got these dates wrong sometimes in the past on other broadcasts, so I apologize. So it's important that in between all our busy lives, we're trying to research, catch up. So Herbert Walker Bush in 1990, I think on the 11th of September, September the 11th, made a reference to the New World Order. In 1991, there was another speech in which he made another reference to the New World Order. Then we have the Kyoto goings on in regard to the climate change emergency, etc., starting to look at that, starting to see, well, how can we address all these issues, as we are then ramping up to the UN 17 sustainable goals, then going into Agenda 21 and Agenda 30. Now, my dear friends Carl are the experts on that. My dear friends Dan Happel from Connecting the Dots are experts on that. Another friend of mine, Alex Newman, is another brilliant expert on that. And Alex has attended COP27 and all this, the one that was in Egypt this year. Yeah. It's not about name dropping. It's actually about putting the time in to spend time with these people, to buy their books, and to do the research which explains why we are where we are. Yes. So I had the privilege this year to attend the Parliament of World Religions. The first Parliament of World Religions was in 1893. Here's another book. Incredible World's Parliament of Religions at the Chicago Columbian Exposition of 1893, a comparable and critical study by Clay Lancaster. So this particular book then begins to outline the history of why people began to meet there. Now, I don't think it's hyperbole to actually say that at the Parliament of World Religions, it's where Eastern philosophy, Eastern religions then really began to invade into America and into American society. Now, at that Parliament of World Religions in 1893, Chicago and the Vivekananda Society. So this particular gentleman was then center stage. Swami Vivekananda was center stage at the Parliament of World Religions in 1893. Now, what I find absolutely fascinating when I've talked about the Parliament of World Religions, I've said to other Americans, do you know that the Parliament of World Religions exists? And people have gone, what is that? Well, let's just come to it. Let's come to it right now. This is the Parliament of World Religions manual. Okay, it lists all the different seminars that were going on at the Parliament of World Religions. It is this thick of 2023. It is a 303-page document. Now, the Parliament, there was a 100-year gap from 1893 to 1993. There was a 100-year gap, but that doesn't mean that various things were not happening in regard to the background, because there were a lot of things that were going on. Now, we can end up going down a huge rabbit warren and undergoing a journey, Chris, down history. And we're going to have to do that. And it doesn't mean that we cover all that today. We may end up covering that in the future. But in regard, this is something that's very personal to me because of a dear friend of mine. This, in regard to world events, or regard to one of an event that's happened in America that the left, the globalists, the New World Order are exploiting. So let's just roll back, and we, God willing, I'll remember and we'll come to that. At the moment in America, we see an invasion, and I'm going to call it that because I believe it is, of at least 7,000 illegal immigrants a day that are coming over the border of Mexico. We then have seen these trains coming up through South America, then invading the American border. Other people who have been observing what's been going on have talked about the invasion, talk about all types of people that are coming over, Chinese, etc., invading America.
Mm-hmm.
Then at the seminar, one of the seminars in the Parliament of World Religions, and having recently just come back from a big tour of America, catching up with friends, attending 3 conferences, I then have been, thank you, right, theosophy, etc. This is important. So I have then observed, I've just recently observed what's happening in Texas. And then at the Parliament, I then heard one of the mayors talking, the mayor of San Antone. So the mayor of San Antone, whose name mistakes me at the moment, was talking about with another mayor from America, with 2 other mayors from Canada, was talking about the fact that he is not to ask for papers. He has asked for how he can help. And in San Antone, they have helped, according to his words, but I suspect it's far more. 500,000 illegal immigrants have gone into San Antone. That is one town in Texas. Now,
Right.
if we look at the geography, what else is happening with the amount of other people that are invading Texas? Look at the fentanyl that's coming over the border, etc., etc. Now, with the mass migration push, and you and I were discussing this off camera, this is all relevant. This is all relevant in regard to the Parliament of World Religions. The Parliament of World Religions is NGO, non-government organization center. It's the crossroads of this. It's where these people meet, where these people might be looking for their next job, where these people can look at promotion within the Parliament of World Religions.
Yeah.
Just to make a comment, from 1993, the Parliament has then regularly met. So we're looking at what's happening in Texas. In the UK, on the southern border, over the English Channel with Dover, dinghies are coming over from Europe. We have an invasion going on as well.
I'm gonna show a video. So keep going.
Okay. The present leader of the opposition in Parliament, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, a member of the Trilateral Commission, a globalist organization, in recent times has just talked about the fact that he went over to Europe with his shadow minister Yvette Cooper, and they were then trying to grandstand to look like statespeople in Europe. But suddenly a discussion came up about the fact that maybe they would let in 120,000 refugees into the UK every year. You have got to be, this is a family show, so I'm going to try and keep my language. This is unbelievable. You've got to be joking. What, you're looking at allowing 120,000 people into the UK? So a geography lesson. The UK fits into Texas nearly 3 times. The UK has 68 million people. North Dakota is half the size of the UK, but only has 700,000 people and is definitely the breadbasket, if not one of the breadbaskets of America and the world. We'll just put that in context. So we are having a mass invasion. There's a big invasion of immigration going on to Italy, etc., etc. When we are seeing wars deliberately misplacing people, and when we are also seeing the climate change narrative absolutely pushed to reinforce this whole thing of people movement. Now, as other people greater than me have stated, and I remember recently Alex Newman saying this brilliantly, if we look to the Bible, we then know what the enemy is going to do, everything in reverse.
Yeah.
Why should we be surprised? But when we think, if we are in certain countries and we believe that we are then in a Christian culture, a Christian country. Now, having just come back from America and then living here, no, we are not living in a Christian country, not with what I observe at the moment. Every single thing within Scripture. So, nation states are created by God. We look at Nimrod, Tower of Babel, to attack God. From there, different languages were then given. Nation states are important to God, and any country that's not in charge of its own borders, not in charge of its own laws, not in charge of its own language, and not in charge of its own money supply is not a country anymore. And the whole idea is to push this towards a new world order. That's why I
Right.
say about those speeches. Now, this has been in play. You talked about this. We talked about this off camera. And when I have said to you about trying, who are we trying to educate about this? And we are trying to educate people. Why we're trying to do that is because people need to understand how long this has been in play. And
Right.
the thing is, this is my personal opinion, because I've only recently, over the last 13 years, began to wake up to so much of this, is
Mhm.
that this has all been deliberately hidden. So we look at, of course, we know about the formation of the Federal Reserve. You and I, we, through research, may turn around and come to the conclusion, and putting Donald Trump's presidency aside in this next comment, is that the last president of the United States that we could say maybe someone who actually consulted the Constitution was Grover Cleveland, a fantastic book written about him. I think Iron Man. If I get that title right, we'll try and find it. Now, I think he left office in 1897. He was in office, he lost, and then he came back into office to finish another 4 years. The piece of paper that stands in the way, thank you, the creature of Jekyll Island. Yep, I had the privilege to meet G. Edward Griffin at the Red Pill this year, a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
And I have that book to my right. The key thing is that the piece of paper, and I'm sorry if other people have heard me say this countless times, the piece of paper that stands in the way of the New World Order is the Constitution of the United States. From its formation, my opinion, from its formation, and then having it ratified, the Constitution ratified by 1789, then it has permanently, since the War of Independence, been under attack
Yeah.
because of what it stands for, the freedoms, what it stands for. And I have to say that in certain parts of America, yes, you can breathe that air. Also, without it sounding a very naive comment, you are a continent. You are a massive continent. You are vast. You are not the biggest landmass. Okay, the biggest landmass, of course, is Russia. Then that, I believe, then goes to Canada. Now, that means that within your states, all the states, they're different. They are different. The businesses that are there are different. How you may handle different weather, etc., etc. It's all different. Of course, you've got hurricanes, tornadoes, and all the rest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what
Can I?
we are seeing, and what we've got in Australia right now is, and let's try and work hard to get these facts right. Australia is looking at changing its constitution in regard to the First Nations people, in regard to Aborigines and all the rest. And suddenly you are bringing in even more of a division. So what I'm saying is, here's the illustration. If you then want to get rid of Australia Day, a day when people celebrated the fact that they were becoming Australian citizens, and they actually wanted to do that on that day. Why am I talking about that? What I'm saying is we're seeing more and more divisions of people group that begin to break up more and more of nation states. So if you then go to America, the fact that you enter America legally, you have to know the maybe questions. You have to do an exam.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
means that you would have to know about who the governor of your state is. which what presidents there are, how many presidents were they from a certain date, etc., etc. You have to know about the culture that you are entering into, so you become an American citizen. If you then have, like we are at the moment, where it seems like a private army of young men who are then being pushed into hotels, if we are then seeing that university accommodation is being denied to local students, and we are then saying, right, we're going to have these immigrants in because all of that money is paid for by the government, which means it's a regular income. These issues are then going on in America. They're going on around the world, all at the same time.
Right.
So what you then have is you then have to see that there is a mindset. There is a way of pushing
Never seen anything like
at the same time. So you come down to the Parliament of World Religions. The Parliament of World Religions is where you've got NGO Central meets the climate change narrative, meets the we are anti-oil. You and I have just done off camera, just said, you know, the misnomer of we shouldn't call oil a fossil fuel. Good one. But we're not going to argue about that now. So all of those things are being pushed. The concern is when all of this begins to be pushed within the context of a church setting. Now, in America, and I've forgotten the producer's name, and he's the main presenter, but the fantastic film of The Enemies Within was is then pushed. Now, The Enemies Within that had one of my heroes for America, which is Trevor Loudon, who happens to be from New Zealand, which is very interesting, who has written a number of books. Go on, Chris.
Enemies Within the Church, specifically. That's the title you want to look for. We talked about it last time, but in case you didn't watch that program, it's Enemies Within the Church. Go ahead.
No, Enemies Within the Church. Trevor's written about enemies within America political structure, and then enemies within in regard to Obama. This is real because of the attack upon your nation. Let's just put another thing in context. If you think that Venezuela, not that long ago, as a country, is it's extremely rich in oil and oil reserves. It was not too long ago seen as a vibrant country, the most wealthy within South America, and that is through oil. That is through not adopting a socialist mindset at all. If you then, which has just been revealed in a wonderful piece by Tucker Carlson, if you then look at Argentina, here are some key things to remember and facts, and we ask people to look them up. Argentina, which at the moment, again, is another country turned into a complete and utter basket case. Now, the UK had a little fracas with Argentina in 1982 called the Falklands War. They call those islands the Malvinas. They invaded the islands. We then sent a number of ships down there to then free the islands that they are under UK sovereignty. But putting this in a context, Argentina then may be a population, I think, about 48 million. Their currency is worth diddly squat. When you look up a recent documentary that Tucker Carlson has done, and there he is taking $100 bill to what's called a cave to then get an exchange rate in regard to the Argentinian peso. He literally was asked, how many pesos do you think he's going to get? And he said, oh, it's going to be doorstops. Well, it was a number, maybe 6 doorstops. enough money to fill a big shopping bag. Now, 48 million, high unemployment, many people working for the state, for government, but only 7 million working for the private sector. Right. So those private sector 7 million are paying tax, which is then paying for the rest of the country. This is how bad it is. That would translate to where a country like Venezuela is. Venezuela has oil reserves. That oil, if they begin to pump, means that they would then have revenue in. The fact that Biden has decided to not sign as to stop pumping in Alaska, and there is another license he stopped as well. And as someone described, and it might have even been Tucker himself, to say that everyone was concerned about the environmental damage. Well, the area that they would be drilling in Alaska would be, if you looked at the map, a sort of equivalent of a postage stamp. So in other words, we are having a massive propaganda war against us. So let's go to the Parliament of World Religions. Then let's look at, bearing in mind the enemies within the church film, and I urge people to watch that. And there is a context before we then go into the Parliament of World Religions. The reason why that context is so important is because it talks about the emerging church movement. It talks about, I believe, the New Age invasion into the church. It then brings and ratifies our own particular thinking of the social gospel that has then invaded into the church. In other words,
and the communist aspect as well, the Frankfurt School aspect and all that. Yeah, go ahead.
Which is all of that. Because what we're saying is, it's not about conversion renewal of each individual from inside out. It is saying that we have to change society. Society is unfair. We have to allow everyone to have equity and buy into that. And this whole thing of equity, this word that is constantly pushed, and that's why, just coming back, we are then seeing this whole thing of the NGOs, etc., allowing, immigration to disrupt the whole of the world. This is what's going on. Go on, Chris.
I was right there, because I know if we keep going, we're gonna miss these two videos I want to show. The first one you could comment on. That's about a little over a minute, and the other one is at least 3 minutes long. But I don't want you to sidetrack too much, but this is definitely pertinent to what you're talking about. So I just don't want to miss this because of people's attention span. We don't know if everybody's going to reach the end of the video. So this is the first video right here, dealing with mass immigration. And so I'll add it to the stage.
The sea of people, look at this. Look at this, all the way down to the river, guys. Thousands, 4,000 in one day. In Lajas Blancas, just being completely overrun, guys. Completely overrun because of Secretary Mayorkas and Joe Biden. Democrats did this. Kevin McCarthy, what are you doing to stop it? What do you make of this, man?
Dude, this could get violent in a heartbeat, man. And they said it is emptied out. It's emptied out. A lot of the buses have already left. There were hundreds and hundreds more people earlier today. This is insane. I've never seen anything like this. It's just every month growing to a whole new level.
Yeah. What do you? So you're Panamanian. What do you make? But American. What do you make of what Joe Biden and Secretary
Panama
Mayorkas
is taking the brunt of open border policy in the United States. Every one of these people is being given a free meal 3 times a day by Panama at Panama's expense, and it's swelling every month to numbers that are so chaotic and out of control. And Panama's just stuck in the middle of it all. They're just stuck here in the middle of the whole thing.
All right. You got all that, right? Making sure that you can hear it. Correct?
I couldn't hear that, sadly, but
couldn't hear
I
it?
can get
No?
So the guy at the end, was he making a comment on then the open border policy of America?
What he's saying is Panama is taking the brunt of the migrants coming in because they're dropping them off by the boatloads. Not the boatloads, but the bus loads, and the buses already left, so they're just stuck with them, and so they have to feed them a certain amount of food every day, and so Panama's taking in that economic strife, and so these people eventually, if they don't leave there, they'll eventually come here to the Mexico border, New Mexico, Texas. When you see, for those that don't know, this term called open borders, the open border policies, that's what they were referring to in the video. If you ever see some of these protests going on over the last few years or whatever, they're saying no borders, no walls, no USA at all.
Yeah.
So straight up communism, where they want to burn down the whole thing and build it up in their own image. And it's not about a black and white or a brown and white or all these stupid ideologies flying around. They want to change the total demographics of America and other countries. We're not the only victims here. No, you're going to see that in a minute. A lot of the why you see a war, what we call anti-whiteism. You see a war on white people. It's a communist thing to change the demographics within the voting system as well, because a lot of what we call Caucasians vote with the conservative values. Not all, of course, but a lot, right?
Well, sorry, go on.
Now we're getting more what they call black people. I'm brown, so what they call black people voting conservative as well, because blacks were mostly conservative years ago, a long time. And that started to change when they started changing the culture with the entertainment. Some of the rap music, I said some, not all, some of the rap music and other stuff on TV. And so the family degradation started to happen. So that part is already somewhat complete. Okay, so now flood the countries with migrants from everywhere. And don't think that all these people are running from some bad situation. They're being flown here. Obama flew a bunch of them here in his tenure. And here we go with Obama 3.0 through Joe Biden. They're flooding our country again. But this time is much worse than it was before. I remember reading back in 2016 about these, I think these guys are from Africa. They went to a Burger King and attacked the clerk, or whatever you want to call him, the server, with a machete. And I believe it might have also been a person trying to get their food. Okay, they raped people here that you never heard about through the mainstream. They raped young girls. So this is the same thing they're doing over in Greece and all these other countries over there. So the next video I'm going to play, I really hope that you could hear this one, because it's very important.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure, let's go.
And it's something we need to come back to. At the Parliament of World Religions, one of the seminars on page 205, I'm just going to hold that up, because if people can see it, then they can see I'm not making this up. Right? Rise of white Christian nationalism and threats to US democracy. Hold that thought after what you have just said, Chris, and then hold January 6th in your mind as well. The fact that you are not a democracy, you are a representative constitutional republic. And look at the lexicons are important, and look at how they're trying to use words to change. All right, let's watch this one in regard to Italy.
All right, I hope you can hear this one, sir, because this is from Daily Caller.
Right.
Lampedusa is in crisis. That's according to the mayor of the small Mediterranean island. 7,000 migrants and refugees arrived by sea within just 2 days this week.
That's more illegal immigrants on that island than there are actually Italians.
Lampedusa is Italy's southernmost port and the closest one for those crossing the Mediterranean from North Africa. They often arrive on overcrowded, flimsy boats. Almost 2,000 people have died making the journey so far this year.
The only ability that the authorities in Lampedusa have is to take in 400 migrants. So all the others are roaming about, trying to find shelter, trying to find food and water.
Before you ask what's Italy's responsibility to those people, you've got to ask what's Italy's responsibility to Italians. If you don't secure a border, you don't have a country in the first place. So that's the first responsibility of Italy, have a secure border, and then you can start to work out an orderly and compassionate migration system. But if you've got people from failed states swamping nation states, you'll just turn them into failed states as well, and nobody is helped.
The other problem, as far as all of this is concerned, is that many of these migrants don't want to stay in Lampedusa. They want to obviously go further north to other countries in Europe. And that is another problem that Italy has also got to deal with, because not many European countries want to take those migrants in.
All right. So you saw there that these weren't desperate families, okay? Military-age men, whether it's in America or Italy, Greece, or Japan, wherever they're doing this whole borderless thing, mass immigration, they're building a army that will listen to them when they throw them little candy bars, you know, a little welfare. Vote for us and we'll feed you. We'll give you $1,200 a month. Oh, what? In my country, I only made $5 a month. You know, go ahead.
I'm trying to find some words because I've just watched something that's absolutely made me furious, to be quite honest. I am very aware of what's just happened there.
Yeah.
So you've got an island that is now been invaded by 7,000 immigrants, where there's far more immigrants than there are actually Italians. Now let's go back. You look at Libya, Tunisia, but let's look at Libya, that's not too far from there. Now, suddenly people talked about, round about, I'm not sure whether it was 2011, 12, where there's suddenly this uprising of freedom that was happening within North Africa there. Something kicked off in Tunisia, certain events happen in Libya, and then NATO decided to remove Colonel Gaddafi. I am not defending Gaddafi at time. I'm not being an apologist for him. However, the fact that the evidence comes out that we then turned Libya into a complete basket case when the man actually was looking after his citizens and turned around and said, if you get rid of me, you will then have a massive immigration problem into Europe. And he is absolutely right. And then appallingly, the whole thing of slave trade, etc., then coming back to Libya in regard to certain markets and where it appears that human beings are being sold. That is out there. People go and research. So we have then, as that man said, as they said on the Andrew Bolt show, which is a very good show on Sky News, turned around and said, if you do not have a country in charge of its own borders, then you do not have a country anymore. And then with George Soros having now handed his billions over to his son, who is even more liberal progressive, and then thinks, okay, we are going to undermine America, etc., so we're going to see even more traffic within Texas, etc. We are then going to see, you as you watch that in Italy, when I don't know whether it was in a supermarket they invaded. So suddenly, where the water resources, the power resources, the resources in regard to schooling and hospitals, etc. This is deliberate to disrupt everything, and as you say, to burn it down. Now, we have got Christians with a mindset to say that this kind of behavior is perfectly acceptable. And that's when, and I'm sorry, but I didn't find Jesus held up as, I am the way, the truth, and the life at all at the Parliament of World Religions, because it's the interfaith movement being used by the UN to push forward a new world, and the WEF, a new world order agenda by now racking up this whole thing of climate change. So what they would then say, if you then are going to go around the world and create wars and disruption, Syria is another case. If you are then going to do that, and then of course within Ukraine, then sadly people are going to get killed, and people are going to start moving around when you then push the whole climate change agenda, Chris. And then, having just had the COVID and the economic bankruptcy that we're saying, this is not helping us.
I'm going to show you another video that I'm going to show again on another program, but this video is very relevant to what you're talking about right now. And
support. And let me tell you something.
You've probably seen it. But first I want to say, if you haven't noticed, if you've been paying attention to the politics around the globe, and it's getting more increasing here in America, first, anti-whiteism, then a demonization of nationalism. Don't care about your own country, care about the others, And then what they're going to say is, that's Hitlerian because Hitler was a nationalist. That's a red herring argument, a straw man, whatever you want to call it. Okay, it's false. Okay, yes, he was a nationalist, but nationalism has been around since the birth of man. Okay, so this video now has to do with New York, and they voted for sanctuary cities. They voted for immigration, mass immigration, illegal immigration, and now they're crying about it, it seems. And I'll explain that in a minute. So let me add this to the stage and play.
Support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. One time we were just getting Venezuela. Now we're getting Ecuador. Now we're getting Russian speaking coming through Mexico. Now we're getting Western Africa. Now we're getting people from all over the globe have made their minds up that they're going to come through the southern part of the border and come into New York City.
You don't say.
And everyone is saying it's New York City's problem. Every community in this city is going to be impacted. We had a $12 billion deficit that we're going to have to cut. Every service in this city is going to be impacted. All of us. And so I say to you, as I turn it over to you, this is some of the most educated, some of the most knowledgeable, probably more of my commissioners and deputy commissioners and chiefs live in this community. So as you ask me a question about migrants, tell me what role you played. How many of you organized to stop what they're doing to us? How many of you were part of the movement to say, we're seeing what this mayor is trying to do, and they're destroying New York City? It's going to come to your neighborhoods. All of us are going to be impacted by this. I said it last year when we had 15,000. I'm telling you now, with 110,000, the city we knew we're about to lose. And we're all in this together, all of us. Staten Island saying, send them out to Manhattan. Manhattan is saying, send them out to Queens. Queens is saying, send them out to Brooklyn. No, it's not the game we can play. Open the floor up.
All right. So they allowed BLM to burn down the dang city, right? They even made was it in New York? I believe they made some street mural for BLM, which is nothing but, if you don't know, if you're watching and you don't know, it's a communist front. And not just communist, but a cult, because Marxism is Satanism. And the people that were running BLM were witches, lesbian witches. Anyway, so you got all of that. You voted sanctuary cities. You voted to defund the police. Crime skyrocketed. I mean, skyrocketed. People were afraid to even go back to New York. Businesses flee the city. What? I mean, New York City. So here it is. Now you're going to complain when the whole plot is this.
Yeah.
Get the chaos going. Get the chaos going. Bring the solution, and the solution will be robots, drones, technocracy. I'm going to talk about that more on another show I'm going to do, because I got so much stuff to put on, but go ahead.
Absolutely right. And Chris, that mayor, is it Mayor Adams?
I can't remember his name, but you're probably right.
That mayor, oh yeah, we're going to be a sanctuary city. Oh, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I have no sympathy for the politics of that man. I have absolute sympathy for people living in New York, and you and I both have mutual friends that live in New York. This is the issue.
Yeah, Eric Adams.
Sorry?
Eric Adams.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the guy is an idiot. Now, bring back Rudy Giuliani to New York. That's what I say.
Big, massive contrast.
Yes. Well, the contrast is obvious. It's a bit like turning around and going, how much was oil? How much was it to a gallon to fill up your car under Donald Trump? Right. It might have been at one point $1, if that. They're virtually trying to give it away. Now, and then I'll say at the most $2 a gallon. Now it's $3.50, if not approaching $4 a gallon. And as you understandably, because of the size of your continent, you are car and truck based. If trucks cannot afford to transport goods across America, then people are not going to eat. That's as simple as that.
Well, Mark, it's simple. It's really simple. Bring in the electric vehicles. Bring in the batteries that cost $5,000
With great respect, Biden's idiot, that lady who was then trying to do a tour of America in her EV, and very soon the electric vehicle, it broke down, and then she went to back up by entering into a petrol-driven car to be driven somewhere privately, or they're going ahead to make sure there's space for them to charge their EVs. Well, let's just put certain things in context while you've slightly taken a brilliant, wonderful diversion. An EV, as soon as you drive an electric vehicle and charge your mobile phone, put your radio on and put the air conditioning on, immediately loses the amount of miles per EV charge that you will get out of that vehicle. That's it. I do not understand the stupidity of people not actually understanding this. And we need to then, we'll make a comment about oil. We're talking about resources. Oil is not finite. There is loads of it, and there is a blessing. And as soon as an oil well, having spoken to a dear friend of mine who was in the oil business, and others, and there are stuff on YouTube making this comment, as soon as oil runs out, over a period of time, it will refill those wells all over again. Yes, in America, I think around about 1915, just before that, you had electric vehicles. You had electric scooters. Look it up. It's all out there. Now, this is about control. It's not about nicotine, which is a military grade bioweapon. And other people greater than me have confirmed that and said that. This is about control. No other question. And the sad thing is that they have done such a fantastic, incredible job on the propaganda, because, say, if you take us as a country, we've swallowed all this. But going back to what Adams was saying, New York, which I've had the privilege to go to, is an amazing, amazing city. So much they named it twice, as it says within the song. But you are deliberately wrecking the city. You are deliberately undermining laws. If you've got then San Francisco, as a friend of mine, Dave Rubin, did a fantastic report on that when he's walking through the streets in San Francisco, and a friend of mine has to do that in which to go to work, and people are defecating on the pavements and all this kind of thing. This is outrageous. This is not right, and a complete and utter undermining of laws. Chris, are you going to show us another video?
No. This is a book that came out a while back. I just got my hands on it. It's called Energy Non-Crisis, by Lindsay William, pretty much showing that there is no oil crisis. There is no energy crisis. Like just what you're explaining a minute ago, the reserves are there and they're not going anywhere, you know?
Well, let's talk about another book then. We've said this because when Mayor Adams is talking about the resources and all the rest, when in our country we have, I believe, if you take, as you know, the UK is made up of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. That is the United Kingdom, right? Hence why it's called the United Kingdom. There is a wonderful history explaining how we have got to that point. But there was recently an article talking about the trees that have been chopped down in Scotland, which is at the top of our country and the north, to make way for these windmills that are supposedly generating electricity to replace fossil fuels, as they call it. Now, I think we need to drop the word fossil in regard to that, because oil has been there. Now, that's not a popular thing to say, especially in regard to people that call themselves Christians and they believe in evolution and do not believe in the Genesis biblical narrative. The
That's
amount
called, just to tell people, that's called theistic evolution, where they try to meld the theory of evolution with the Bible. False teaching.
What's it called again, Chris?
Theistic evolution.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I love the way that you define that. I love the way that we can work hand in hand in this. So thank you.
Oh,
The key thing is there is a figure that has been bandied around of 14 million trees in Scotland being chopped down to make way for these propellers. I need to reconfirm that because I was so shocked. Now, these propeller windmills that in the dark have two lights that are red that look as something out of 1984 generate a wattage of 0.03% of the wattage that we need to run our country. Now, at the moment, this supposed conservative government within the UK seems to think it's fantastic to be blowing up coal fire power stations that they don't think that we need anymore. They are deliberately creating this chaos, and they are deliberately turning us back into a feudal society to deny people energy. Now, let's bring this in. This book, Fossil Future, Why Global Human Flourishing Requires More Oil, Coal and Natural Gas, Not Less. Alex Epstein. Right, I'm about to make myself profoundly even more unpopular than I am already. There are 1,501 scientists that have said man-made global warming is a load of utter BS. They might not have said it in that way of a load of utter BS. I am going to say that it's a load of utter BS. We do not have any impact, if hardly ever, on the earth warming up or cooling. They are cycles. They are God-given. He is in charge. Now, before someone, oh, that's such an easy thing to say. Right. The population bomb, The Greening of America, those books from between 1969 and 1974, and there's another book that is important that I'm trying to get, have been put forward as building this particular narrative. Now, yes, there is no climate emergency. Now, on the back of this book, you've got one of the most important people in this debate that says the following: at this strange time in history, with a mass movement demanding an end to the 80% of our energy provided by, he uses the phrase, fossil fuels, Alex Epstein has the nerve to walk in the streets of New York wearing a t-shirt that blares I love fossil fuels. This book confirms the genius of his stance. Net zero is suicide. Now listen to this. Patrick Moore, co-founder of Greenpeace and author of Fake Invisible Catastrophes and the Threat of Doom. Patrick Moore, the co-founder of Greenpeace, who then left Greenpeace because Greenpeace then became anti-human. Now, the Bible, yes, I've mentioned that book, which is an anathema to so many of course, our global elites do not believe in this. The Bible says to subdue the earth, to procreate and subdue the earth. The elites have started a genocide agenda to kill people. When you then have Greenpeace as a movement that is saying it's all humans that are doing this, when you have got the World Wildlife Fund that used to be fronted by Prince Philip, King Charles's dad, and Prince Philip turned around and was asked a question: if you were given a second life, if you were reincarnated, what would you come back as? And he said, a virus, concerned about the spread of what he thinks is an overpopulation. Now, it's rather ironic in regard to his relatives, his aunts, then marrying Nazis. And then it's rather ironic that, of course, the Habsburgs, which are related to German royalty, and then they became the Windsors, so that they could then hide that history, and then they're fighting, Kaiser Wilhelm in the First World War and killing poor average citizens of their countries on both sides.
Right.
And just the human life is easy to throw away as long as the elites benefit. Now, you and I on this show, we haven't got time to go through certain history of the impact of those wars, and that's something we need to come back to. But climate change, again, in the Parliament of World Religions, they are saying that climate change, the whole thing is a done deal. The debate on it is over, as that President 44 said, Barack Hussein Obama. It's decided, climate change. Well, that's really, really interesting, Mr. Obama. You seem to have a house in Martha's Vineyard, I think, on the coast there. So obviously, you don't really believe in man-made global warming and the water level coming up, because by now, according to Al Gore, the whole of New York should be under the water and all this kind of thing. If there is going to be a catastrophe, if there are earthquakes, etc., and then we've seen one appalling one in Morocco, if we see these, to me, this is natural things that are happening. Okay? Now, that's a very, very unpopular thing to say. Now, in regard to biblical prophecy, we know, as the Bible says, that there will be wars, rumors of wars, there will be these kind of natural disasters, and then there's a reference to birth pangs, etc. Now, that is not a different subject, but I'm just throwing that out there because this is what is really important, because we have a mindset of the interfaith movement, of the emerging church movement, of where the church seems to, which it does here, the supposed church interfaith, using the interfaith. Now, cults, so the Baha'i faith, which is very much involved in the Parliament of World Religions, believes in a new world order and a one world government system. That's why they are so involved in this. What is also very interesting, and I'm not saying that Seventh-day Adventists were at the Parliament of World Religions, I want to make another point. Seventh-day Adventists, within their church meetings, within their cultural discussions, talk about preparing for the end times. That was something I noted, having spent some time with some, which I thought was fascinating recently. So they will talk about that. That is within their lexicon. Where, of course, when you are sitting in a seminar, as I did, opposite Al Gore's daughter, who runs Karen or Corrine Gore, who runs a seminary or part of a seminary in New York somewhere, who's then going, oh, isn't it fantastic? We've disinvested from oil, we've disinvested from this, we've disinvested from that to pursue our climate change credentials. When we have now got a situation where we look at, and you brought this up earlier and you showed me, this whole thing of the evangelical movement in America saying that, you know, man-made climate change is real and is a deep concern. And two of those signatories on that list I'm aware of. One I've heard speak, which is Brian McLaren, totally and utterly involved in the emerging church movement. And then Chris, going back to the film Enemies Within the Church, and also it then talked about a gentleman called Clyde Calvert, who a few years ago, I think, retired from Walnut Hill Community Church in California. He then used to be in charge of the Evangelical Alliance over here within the UK, and the Evangelical Alliance within the UK, my own understanding of it then had this all sort of this good neighbor scheme. And then you then find that people are then pushing or advising on the fact that there is no problem in taking them. There is complete and utter delusion. Now, you have shown me that, well, they would call us conspiracy theorists, but actually we can back all this up. The list of people at the end of those supposed church leaders need to be investigated, because at the end of the enemies within film or enemies within the church, there are a list of leaders, and I'm sure that they would correlate to that list there. That's what is really, really important as well. Now, you had at the Parliament of World Religions, you've got the Unitarians, okay, you've got the Baptists, you've got the Lutherans, and all of this. Here is a big, and then of course you've got, as I said, seminars, the rise, and maybe we should end with this, the rise of white Christian nationalism and threats to US democracy. On January the 6th, 2021, over 1 million Americans, not the thousands that they think or either portray, but over 1 million Americans, if you stood on the steps of Congress and looked all the way down, it was full of patriots on that day that attended. They attended because the results of the November presidential election of 2020 were being ratified in regard to the Electoral College, in regard to the votes coming from each individual state. And on the floor of the House, you then see Ted Cruz, Paul Gosar, and another gentleman stand up and start questioning Mike Pence in regard to the rules, etc., in regard to questioning things. Now, Mike Pence was, with the film that I was seeing, I'm just trying to get these facts right, was then pointing to the fact that there was a legality of how they could conduct, and that maybe the questioning is not something that they could do. The reason, this point, anywhere between 3 minutes past 1 or 7 minutes past 1, and this is important, and I want to give a big shout out to a very dear friend of mine, David Summerall of StopHate.com, who is leading the charge on this, has done unbelievable hours and hours and hours out of his own, on his own dime, of investigating what happened on Jan 6, has said to me personally that as soon as those questions got up to start, at anywhere between 3 minutes past 1 and 7 minutes past 1, the police, Metro Police, fired smoke canisters, rubber bullet grenades into the Patriots crowd. Some of those people were the elderly, some of them were the children, and as on video it says, get these people out. There's a picture, and I can't think of the gentleman's name, where he has a yellow rubber bullet that goes basically through his mouth, goes in one side, and you see the end of it.
Yeah.
Now, having met people, had the privilege to do that, there were people that nearly died as the police are attacking them on the east side. People were defending themselves. The police opened fire on this patriot crowd. That's what happened. Now, there were 5 casualties that day. One of those happened to be Officer Signick. The other one you are aware of course, is Ashley Babbitt. There's Kevin Greetham, Benjamin Phillips, and Roseanne Boyland. And Roseanne Boyland was clubbed to death by police officers there. That video footage is out, is beginning to be out there to confirm this. Comments by people confirming this. I'm not saying this as hyperbole or to be dramatic. That story has not been explained to the American people. When you then have seminars saying rise of white Christian nationalism and threats to the US democracy, and here's the big one. Here's the big one. When you have in PSHE, Personal Social Education Studies or whatever, or PHSE, in a girls' school in London, in the East End of London, or in Essex, in London, talking about this subject and white nationalism, and then you've got a picture of Donald J. Trump. Yeah, you are then pushing propaganda and thinking. And if anyone has not awakened to the fact of this, and I say this with much love, because I have many, many friends in America, and I've just spent some time with them. And having been to 3 conferences and taking temperature, if people will just hurry up and wake up to what is going on, or stop listening to pastors that are not leading them, that they will actually start to look around and see what's happening to their country. Because when I am in a dear friend's house and I am watching this man giving his absolute all and taking phone calls from people that have been arrested for Jan 6 constantly, virtually as soon as he wakes up till late at night. They have given Enrico, the head of the Proud Boys, 22 years in prison because he refused. He'd been talking about this in an article in Gateway Pundit. There's been some Twitter spaces, and personally, I'm not saying this to drop names. It's humbling to listen to Enrico's voice personally, which I did on the Twitter space. There is a point to what I'm saying. When we then see someone else for 17 years, 10 years, for just entering a building, when we have just seen a man dressed up as George Washington arrested and given a year for entering the building. Someone I know was given 30 days for entering the building for 37 seconds and then being asked to leave by a police officer, obeying that. This fight is real, and the fight is real because it's about destroying Western civilization. And you only have to look at what has been happening in America, what has been happening in the UK, what has been happening in New Zealand, what is happening in Australia, and what is happening in Canada. Now, 2 dear friends of mine in Canada, and 3, including Carl, have been screaming, trying to wake up Americans to what has been going on because of what the foreshadowing of what is going on. So going back to Jan 6, look at how the propaganda is manipulated. And that is on both sides, where you've got 2 wings of the same bird within Washington, D.C. I come back to this, and people may think, oh my goodness me, there's a jump. Well, when you've got a seminar on that, when I walk into a seminar on the Monday at the Parliament of World Religions about misinformation, and a gentleman within 3 minutes turns round and says that the person that seems to be the closest to the Antichrist is, I believe, is Donald Trump. And there is a man called the Reverend Mark Winfield, is the executive director, and I'm just reading it from here, and publisher of Baptist News Global. And there he is, leading a seminar, Finding Truth in an Era of Misinformation. Well, Mr. Mark Wingfield, I think you have given a load of misinformation in regard to saying that I think that Donald Trump is the nearest person to the Antichrist on earth. We have to open our eyes to the fact that we have a full frontal asymmetric attack and the undermining of our societies, big time, that this has been in play for a long time. I finished on Jan 6 again.
Mm-hmm.
That is what is going on, because it's about an undermining of the Constitution of the United States. The whole thing was a setup. The fact that the President Trump says, I want you to march peacefully, patriotically.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Enrico has been given a 22-year sentence, and he then was asked to basically drop Trump in it. He refused to do that, and by refusing to do that, he has the consequences of facing 22 years in jail in regard to that. He wasn't even, hear me, he wasn't in the Capitol. He wasn't even there. We are now seeing the arrest, the fact that a court case where Owen Schroyer of InfoWars has been given 60 days imprisonment because he was there on Jan 6. Owen has done some incredible reports on the Texan-Mexican border, talking about the buses crossing over the border to pick up illegal immigrants and then busing them into Texas and taking them elsewhere in the country. Why is that all relevant? Pastors, leaders, churches are not going near any of this subject. There are churches, one I could name, maybe later at some other point, where they operate a church, a prison ministry, and operating a prison ministry, but trying to get these people to talk about the Jan 6 prisoners, to get Conservative Inc. to talk about the Jan 6 prisoners, because they think it's a political time bomb. Well, there is a book called The American Gulag Chronicles. I want to remind people of that, to look up the book. And maybe, Chris, in a minute, you could find the website of the American Gulag Chronicles. And I urge people to buy that book, and I urge people to put it on their coffee table, because that book is a way of raising money for the Jan 6 prisoners. Any publicity on this subject is shadow banned. You know, people are not paying enough attention. I then urge people to go to David Summerall's website of stophate.com. There is a new documentary coming out within days of looking at the correct timeline and saying that, again, the events, this will be the third documentary that this dear friend of mine has made at his own personal cost. And I have to say, thank you, Chris, for finding that. I have been upset and grieving because I just do not find enough Americans awake to what is going on. And when people think, oh, the New World Order, all of this is coming down the line. No, it is all in place now, Chris. It is happening. When you see the fact that you've got Mayor Adams in New York saying, oh, we've got to address this, and these people will not shut the border. When you've seen an election, without question, it has been stolen. If people haven't woken up to the fact that Fox News called Arizona for Biden early, and because of all your time zones, then it meant that, oh, people in New York think, oh, we're not going to bother to go out and vote now.
Right.
Kind of thing. In other words, what do you think, if you're following that and you think, oh, it's on our side? No, it's not. And then, as has been pointed out by people like Alex Newman, if people do not know Alex Newman's work, and it is very important that we honor our friends and honor people with the work that they do. That's why I talk about Carl. That's what I'm going to say with Alex, and Alex is a friend. The key is, Alex writes in the New American, recently wrote an article about BlackRock, recently started listing companies. If we look at BlackRock, if we look at Vanguard, if we look at
State Street.
State Street, all of these companies, what are they doing? They're using your American tax dollars to undermine, and that completely plays in. It plays in. It plays into Jan. It plays into. It plays into Jan 6, and it plays into Jan 6 right now. Right? It plays into that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you know, we're begging people to wake up, but even in the Revolutionary War, you know, fight to free ourselves from Europe and all that stuff, it was a little bit of people, you know, it was a small majority that pushed back, right?
yep.
And so people need to join the small majority and push back because it's never going to be everybody. It's never going to be all the conservatives. It's never going to be all the patriots, you know, because some people don't know what to do. They don't have the means, but at least if you get some mental clarity, you'll be able to push back, starting with you, then your family, and then moving outside of that. You know, especially you men. The problem with fatherless children out here, it's an epidemic. Run back to your children. You know, so we're also finding out about the birth rate. Japan is taking precautions, not precautions. They're moving, not how you say it. They're taking steps to solve their birth rate issues. We need to pay attention to that right now because the more they fraction the family, fraction heterosexuals versus the alphabet people, the birth rate goes down. And that's just a short summary, but you know, we got conditioned to having 2 kids per family when we used to have 13. I was 2. We're not that far from getting to be 1, right? And so as the birth rate drops, these problems are going to increase. And the
It's
people that
very,
choose,
it's very interesting you say that, because something I've observed and I, fall within that category of following that lie.
Mhm.
But then you go out to different states and then you're looking at people on farms and homesteading and stuff like that. And then you think, oh, they've got massive families. They've got 8 to 10 children. And then you begin to work out why, traditionally people working on the land, etc., etc. And many years ago, of course, sadly, some of these children would sadly die. I mean,
Yeah.
my grandfather was one of 11, 12.
Mm.
So these big families, I mean, you are absolutely right.
Yeah.
Chris, you and I, we've just been discussing, because we are going to start having some other conversations, especially with other stuff that we've been looking at. And then it is coming back to the Parliament of World Religions, going through some of the seminars that these people are pushing. And to remind people, I mean, the Parliament of World Religions is paganism, Wicca, all of this, and where this is all going on, and the worship of Gaia.
Right.
Chris, and I just want to say thank you for giving me this platform, and for you and I to have another wonderful discussion that we have, which I always find stimulating, because I'm trying to gather so much information together. And I just like to record this, the irony, as I am talking about my dear friend David Summerall of StopHate.com, the person who tried to phone me was David Summerall from StopHate.com. So that is a bit of a God moment. So I need to go and go off camera and take that call. I just want to urge people to buy books, to get information, make sure that you've got an area to store them, as my little library is getting bigger and bigger, and to look this stuff up,
Absolutely.
and to have your eyes awake to what is going on around you. So, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir, for joining me. I just want to end out with, first, tell people where to find your stuff, your producer, and other things. So tell them about yourself first, and then we'll end it off in a couple minutes.
Right. And I've got to sort my website. So it's marksutherland.org. If you go on YouTube, look up my little film, Between Lambs and Lions, which seems to be more relevant than ever, I think, today, which was first uploaded in 2015. If you go on my website, there's a number of short films. Look up The Iris Echo, which was I didn't mean that to be prophetic as a warning about communism. Look up there. On Twitter, it's the Sutherland Report. Find me there. And that's all I can say at the moment, as I'm still trying to build one or two things.
Right.
So, as I say, and then of course I'm on Facebook. People can find me, message me. There's the picture of a man going, I think our government is not telling us the truth. So you can find me there. But thank you, Chris, very much.
Thank you. And just remember, guys, if you're not saved, get saved today, because all of this is information. There's a reckoning coming to this planet. Jesus Christ is going to return, whether you believe it or not. The truth doesn't warrant your attention. It's just truth. Okay? And so with that, we're all sinners in need of a savior. I got saved. Mark got saved. We all need to get saved to reconcile our relationship with Jesus Christ, who is God. And, you know, he died on the cross, resurrected on the third day for every single one of us. Thing is, most of us don't want to accept the free gift of salvation. And so with that, I say, you need to get saved. And Christians, don't forget, preach the gospel and don't let them burn. Signing off.